Hey everybody, this is Tony Bancroft and Tom Bancroft. We're the
Oh,
Bancroft Brothers.
I like this new intro. You're kind of casual and mellow.
Hi,
I
I'm
think
just
you're
tired.
I think you're just worn out, aren't you?
I'm just tired, but I'm so happy to be here. We are the Bancroft Brothers, and you are welcome to the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast, where we talk about all things animation. We just came out of our very own, very first, the South's very first animation expo called Animation Y'all Expo.
Hosted by the Bancroft Brothers. And yes, like so many people have been going, how do you have time to do that? And how do now one is help, like, right? You know, your wife
Right.
Tony was a big help. She's like a third partner in this group. And
She is.
unfortunately, she couldn't even be there that weekend, but she'd set up so much of it
Yes, we
before
had a
she left.
grandbaby come, and unfortunately, my daughter didn't plan well and had a baby during the weekend of Animation Y'all. So I lost my partner, really the producer and showrunner of the whole thing. But we had friends come out of the woodworks to help us. I mean, literally flying out from California on their own dime just to be there for us and help. And they were a huge help, including my daughter Sierra, who came out from
She
California,
was
and
she was gangbusters all weekend.
Marania Harris, who is works with you at Pencil. She was
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
We had so much help. But it was a real passion project for us, Tom. We've talked about doing an animation expo for years, and me coming out here now to Tennessee, there's been really a passion that we both share for really expanding the animation industry here in Nashville and in Tennessee in general. So we'd love to see it grow.
Yeah.
Um, it was a huge success in so many ways, but mostly from the standpoint of we got so much support, so many people came. We
Yeah.
sold out early, and because of that, we're encouraged to do it again. Let's keep it going, right, Tom?
Bigger and better. We have to. Yeah. That's what we found out was that and every single person, I know you got the same experience. You and I barely saw each other all weekend.
Yeah, I missed
I
you.
was like on one side of the building, you're on the other side and constantly. But we were both sort of running panels. I would do one, you would do one, so we're only in, I think, one panel together, which was the Light of the World panel. And that was really exciting because
Oh,
we
we
got
also were in the Faith and
a,
Animation panel
oh,
together.
that's right. We did too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but we premiered part of Light of the World. And that's what was also cool about it is even though we were small, we had about 700, a little more probably over 700 people that came through the doors, about 500 a day, 550.
Hmm.
And sold out of all of our merch. We had some cool t-shirts and hats and all kinds of whatnots. All of it sold out. And then we had an amazing panel on Light of the World, like we said. That was the film that Tony and I have been working on the last 2 years, 2.5 years for me. And anyway, we showed about 6 minutes of it, and it was so cool. I was so nervous because Aaron
Oh yeah.
Blaze was in the audience, and my mentor Mark Henn.
Oh,
It was a packed house.
so many friends of ours,
Yeah,
from the animation industry were in the audience too. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I was excited. I felt like it was going to go over well, and it really did. So that was cool.
it did. I
Oh
got to
no.
hang out with Ralph Thomas and his wife, and actually my wife more so than me because I was kind of coming and going from that booth quite a bit. But my wife was there, and my father-in-law, even like 3 of my 4 daughters showed up, and they
It
were
was a,
all kind of.
it was
It
a
was a real
family
family.
time.
It was
Yeah.
a family affair. Your daughter was there,
Yeah.
so we had quite a bit of Bancrofts walking around.
Including our mom. And that was funny because she was more popular than we were. I joke with her now. I took her to the airport today, and I called her. I said, "I think you're the queen of animation now," and everybody's mom. She certainly was at the expo. She went around and just met people and talked.
She
I'm Tom and
she
Tony's mommy.
she loved it. You could tell that she got lots of
Oh yeah.
compliments and stuff, and
Yeah.
just loved it, ate it up. Well, Tony, we got to dig into a really fun podcast because this is somebody that I know has plenty of books over at Stewart Ings. So that's a good segue to bring in one and only James Gurney.
Yes. Hi,
Hey, man.
James. Welcome.
Thank you. Good seeing you guys.
You know,
You
it's
know-
so good to have. Do you know Stuart NG Books? You know them.
Yes, I've signed at his booth a few times at Lightbox,
Sure.
and haven't been to his store, or either his new one or his old one. But I love what he carries. All those European imports and the Japanese
man.
stuff and the stuff from China is
The
so
stuff
hard
you
to
can't
find
get
anywhere else.
You can't get it
Oh,
anywhere.
and I just want to say real quick up front, because we didn't say it pre-show to you, because we just connected just now, but Tony and I are huge fans. I mean, I gotta
Yeah, we
say,
are.
this is like a real honor to have you on our podcast,
Thank you.
James.
And me of your podcast too. I've listened to a bunch of your podcast episodes.
Oh,
and
really?
love them. Yeah, Glenn Keane
Oh.
and some others. Mark
Yeah.
Penn.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, and for those that don't know, James Gurney is an uber artist out there that you really should know if you don't already. He has a beautiful website called jamesgurney.com. You should check that out.
I'm
He's
going to
put out-
click. Tony, this is the book that we
Boom!
discovered. How
That's
we
the
discovered
one.
James Gurney. I'm showing a picture of Dinotopia.
He's
Anybody
the
know that
creator
book?
of Dinotopia, which happened over 20 years ago. You put out Dinotopia, I'm guessing, because what we're looking at is the 20th anniversary edition, and it just revolutionized fantasy and illustration like never before. Because there was a time when what you do is really fine art illustration, James, and book illustration. You're a master painter when it comes to light and color, and that's really obvious. You even
Speaking
have
of which,
color and light. We're showing the book.
Segue.
yeah,
Imaginative realism. You had a book called that, and that's still in print. And go check it out. Color and light is. I've seen this on many background painters' desks. As a matter of fact, color and light, a guide for the realist painter, and then recently we've seen you hanging out at Lightbox. Oh, there's one of your originals. Tom just put up an image of the artist
Right.
guide to sketching.
Since I was at it, and by the way, you'll watch our YouTube channel to watch all these if you want to see these actual pictures. But it's the newest book that, and we'll get into this later. I'm kind of done it a little preemptively, but it's this expanded and remastered edition, The Artist's Guide of Sketching with James Gurney and Thomas Kincaid. Don't have to comment on it yet. We're going to get back to that, but go ahead, Tony. So we're giving you a brief overview.
Well, many of you might know James more recently from seeing him at Lightbox, and you've been a big part of. I want to say it's called Sketch Crawl, right?
Yeah, we did what we call colossal characters, where the idea is to paint the background scene as it is in front of you, but to add some kind of gigantic character. So I added Super Mario sitting there a couple of years ago, sitting there in front of the Pasadena City Hall. And everybody did other things, other giant snakes or giant walking robots, things like that. And the idea is to combine observation and imagination, because the two go hand in hand.
But that's kind of become has that become kind of a class that you put on, or is it a free event that you just gather people at Lightbox? How do you guys organize that?
Well, it's just sort of an icebreaker. It just gets people out there to work outdoors and in the public. You don't have to be a member of Lightbox to do it. And we've done other things like that at other venues, like the New York Botanical Gardens. We had a model come and pose in the garden, which is really cool. That's neat. It's fun to do. It's fun to paint from imagination and from observation at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, you've made a career off of that, and let's go back a little bit in time. I saw you've been to several schools. You've learned from different places, Art Center being one of them in California. Where did you go to school? I guess I want to know about James Gurney and how he got bit by the art bug. So take us back to, how did it all start for you?
Well, I always wanted to be an artist. I found a copy of Preston Blair's animation book when I was about 12. So I had a teacher who set me up with an animation stand. I did my own animation short films on cells. But you know,
James
in those
Gurney's
days,
an animator, everybody. I love that.
That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an animator, and I told my parents that. But the thing was, in those days, and we're talking late 70s, my parents said, you got to go to college first, get a degree in something other than art or animation. And so I'd heard of Cal Arts and all that, but I went to UC Berkeley and got an archaeology major first.
Mm.
and
Wow.
studied a little of everything, and then went to Art Center. And then I realized they didn't teach animation at Art Center
Oh,
back then. They do now, I
not at that
suppose, but
point. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No.
And
So
Yeah.
I realized if I'm going to learn this, I have to learn on my own. So I dropped out of art school, and my friend and I, Tom Kincaid, decided to write. I can tell you more about that later, but we decided to do our
Write a
own
book.
book. So writing books is sort of how I've learned how to do stuff because no one was teaching it at the schools.
wow.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you
So like
serious?
you predate us a little bit. I'll just say it another way. You're a little bit older.
Yeah.
But because it sounds like you probably went to Art Center, was it early 80s then? Because you'd already gotten one degree.
Yeah, 79, 80, and then I dropped
Okay.
out in 80. I just went 2 semesters, had a great perspective class from Ted Youngkin, who was terrific. Now, did you
Mhm.
guys, were you at Cal Arts the whole time?
We were at Cal Arts. We
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
went to Art Center though. We looked at it. It was between Art Center and Cal
And I
Arts.
know
It,
Disney
it
had a
looked
good,
intimidating. It looked really intimidating at Art Center.
did.
Like
Very
kind of
slick.
Oh, yeah.
more militant. Like you had to, a lot of homework and long
Yeah.
hours, and you had to be on time. And I don't know.
Yeah, it was. They
Cal Arts was
bragged.
loosey goosey.
They bragged
Yeah.
about having the highest stress level next to Harvard Medical School because of people doing all-nighters and getting sick doing it. But to me,
Oh,
I just got tired of all these classes and these with no windows and these teachers droning on about theory. I mean, it
Yeah.
was kind of the dark ages of animation, and I think, and the dark ages of art education. At least if you want to be a realist painter.
Yes.
But it got better later, I suppose. And I
Yeah, well,
visited
Cal
there.
Arts was the opposite. It was so hippie that it was like you weren't learning anything, especially the fine art program at that time.
Yeah.
It was just stick a nail in a piece of wood and hang it up. That's your art. We saw
Well,
some crazy
But
stuff
were there
there.
some good animation teachers? I mean, did Milt Kahl
No.
ever come out there or anything like that?
We did have good anime. That's the thing that Cal Arts really had going was the most commercial part of Cal Arts was definitely the animation program that they had, but they had theater, they had acting, music, but also fine art.
yeah.
And the fine art people's kind of who I'm talking about. But
There was it came about. I don't know all the history of Cal Arts, or at least I did, and I forgot it all. But Chenard Art Institute, you might have heard of and know of.
Sure.
That was where like the 9 old men would go and do life drawing, or maybe some of them studied there early.
it
on,
was a
'cause
real
that was
classical art school.
classical art school,
Yeah.
and then there was a theater school or a
Performing arts.
performing arts school, and they combined. So when the Disney family started Cal Arts, because it was the Disney family that put the money behind it, because Walt wanted to be able to train the next generation. This is after the 9 old men. Sorry. And because of that, he combined 2 schools that were already known and doing well in Los Angeles to make Cal Arts. And that's how Cal Arts was really born.
Okay.
So the character animation program came later, though. They started with experimental animation, which Glenn Keane actually came through the experimental side because he didn't know. It's a funny story, I guess, but the short of it is that he applied to the wrong one. It sounds like kind of like you, James. You go into to Art Center and not realizing they didn't have animation. He applied for character animation, but somehow his portfolio was accepted in experimental animation.
You're not getting that story right. I'm sorry. You're getting
What?
confused. Yeah, with Jorge Gutierrez, who did do experimental animation, but wanted to do character animation. Glenn actually signed up to be in fine art. He wanted to be a painter, and
right.
And they put him into character animation, and he was like, "What's that? What's character animation?" And so he fell in love with it.
Was the program there? I know Disney started the school, at least for animation, but was there anybody from Warner Brothers like Ken Harris teaching there?
No, it was all Disney from what I know. Well, I mean, there was like people like Hal Ambro, who I guess wasn't just Disney.
But I know him. I know him as a Disney animator. I think he was under Milt for many years.
Yeah, but there was some design people like Bob, who was the famous guy Bob Moore. He was an early design teacher that came over from advertising.
And Tee had just left when we came in. And Dave Mitchner, who was Milt Call's like assistant for many years. So yeah, that was sort of, there was an old guard that had sort of just peeled away as Tony and a few of them were still there when we were there. But
and then we had our teachers were you'll be interested in this, James, is that like Joe Rampt, who was working at Disney in story and then later went to Pixar. He was our story teacher. Chris Buck, who went on to co-direct the Frozen movies. He was our animation teacher. And Mike
among the students, had Brad Bird already gone through that program before you guys got there?
Yeah, they were, we'll say 4 or 5 years, probably just before us. And that was Glenn and John Musker and that group. We were in with our freshman year. It was Pete Docter. Ashley Brennan and Tony and I and I don't know who else, but Pete was the big notable.
And when you got to Disney, which of the 9 old men were still there? Was it I guess Ward?
Well,
Kimball
none of them.
No,
I don't know
Frank
that
Thomas and Ollie Johnston.
No, I don't think any of them were ever involved with CalArts that I know of.
No,
right,
but
Tom?
I mean, at
Disney. When we got to Disney, so this was about 1988, 89. So 88, we were at CalArts. 89, we were interns. The 9 old men had already left, and they were kind of around. They would come in for certain events and stuff or to talk. So they had a good relationship with Disney. But Frank and Ollie were doing the books, and Milt had long retired. I think he may even have just died somewhere around that time. And Mark Davis was still alive and would visit the studio sometimes too. But yeah, they had left just before us. Tony's
I'm showing a picture.
That's you. That looks like
Frank and Ollie,
Ollie.
And over here is Roger Allers.
Oh,
who was a co-director on The Lion King. And I was a director on Mulan at this point, and we had just done a screening we had just finished Mulan, and so we did a screening, and Frank and Ollie came to it, and we took this picture.
Nice.
So when I think about the 9 old men, it occurs to me, just being a fan of early Disney animation, that they should have included like Bill Teitla and Norm Ferguson and Art Babbitt, after all, who animated Geppetto. And Freddie Moore,
but Freddie trained most of the 9 old men, honestly.
I think Disney first used the term in like 1937, which is pretty early on, and they were all the younger guys in their 20s. They weren't old at all. They were a young guy. It was a joke to call it 9 old men.
Yeah.
But also the other guys like Art Babbitt and Bill Teitla were on the wrong side of the strike. So after 1940, Disney wouldn't have included them on any list except the hit list.
Exactly.
Yeah. They were out of there by then. Yeah. So,
but I mean, Art Babbitt, he was the guy that got them doing figure drawing at his house. Had a model over to his house, right? And then Disney heard about that. Oh, you got nude ladies over at your house. Can't do that. We got to bring them in here. But then I'm interested in I guess Don Graham and some of the action analysis. Did you encounter some of that training where you'd have a model posing or moving a lot?
When we were there, it was Walt Stanchfield. He was our Don Graham. And Walt Stanchfield, who used to be like an assistant to Milt and did cleanup for years and stuff, he was an excellent teacher. And so we had life drawing for years with Walt Stanchfield. And then Don Hahn later made a book out of all of his notes, a couple books. There's like a series
2 books,
of 2 really thick ones of all of his notes. But yeah, Don Graham, we had exposure to like his notes, and since then there's been a book published, I think, with Don Graham's notes also. But I heard he was a master.
He came from the Chenard School. I think they grabbed him from there. Yeah, he was one of the instructors there.
Well, it's interesting to me because animation is a field that really developed in the 20th century, of course, but it doesn't have that long history of art history and art criticism and training and theory behind it. It's kind of, no one knows how to fit it into art history, but it really, to me, it's kind of down the central pipeline of where art evolved and what happened with it. And I like to imagine, like, what would have happened if, let's say, the work of Winsor McCay, right? Little Nemo.
Yeah, sure.
What if he was more collaborative? Because he did everything on his own. He did the vaudeville stuff and did Little Nemo on his own, Rabbit Fiend on his own work. And was so talented. But what if he was? This is like an alternate history idea. What if he had attracted a whole team of people and built a studio and did the training to get guys doing his style? His whole style of camera movement and silhouette and story and characterization and theatrical space is so different from Disney's.
Yeah.
I think the animation would have evolved in a totally different direction.
Well, and there might not have been a Walt Disney. I mean, if you think about it, because he was contemporary to Walt, and he was doing amazing things early on. If he would have
much
kept
more
with that,
talented than Walt, let's be honest.
I mean, after he did so for those listening that don't know, he did the very early pantomime black and white short called Gurney the Dinosaur. And to imagine, and it was a huge hit from everything that we've always heard, right? But if he would have kept going and made the first animated feature like Walt did, like I said, there would not have been a Walt Disney. It would have changed the paradigm of animation.
And it was early. I mean, he was animating some of the Little Nemo characters in 1914, I think, really early on. And I remember reading about there was some moment where he was scolding all the animators at some dinner. Have you heard about this?
No. Who was it? Disney?
I don't know if it was Disney guys or other animators that were at a dinner that Winsor McCay was the honored guest and up at the podium. And he was just saying, you guys have really dropped the ball on what's possible with this medium. And it just, there's only so much one guy can do. That's the only thing. I mean, he couldn't possibly do everything, keep all those comic strips going and do animation too.
Yeah,
but Walt was a genius storyteller, but he was locked into the whole rubber hose look of those characters
for a while, which is crazy because if you think about it, Walt grew up with Winsor McCay, honestly.
Sure.
Not maybe grown up. They were probably closer in age, but still, he was influenced by Winsor McCay. There's no doubt about it. And yet Walt wasn't near as talented. And so he kind of had to find little funny animals and wire hose animation. Well, before that, Winsor was already doing anatomical dinosaurs and people and things like that were much more anatomical than anything Walt could pull off. And almost in a way, Walt kind of took a step back to start and then worked into training his. And I think it's a good theory, James, that maybe Walt wouldn't have gone near as far. Like all the art classes, literally the figure drawing, the stuff we were just talking about a little bit ago. I have a feeling that was him sort of trying to get back to where Winsor McCay started, honestly.
Yeah, I always wanted to make a Winsor McCay movie because I think he's such a master. And I feel like, and it's just a revolutionary artist too, the things that he did early on that nobody had ever seen before, that he would be fascinating to do a movie about. But I actually like this take better, James. I think you've given me a new idea. It's the kind of what if version of, if there was somebody that beat Disney.
The way animation has evolved has been kind of the result of all the influences that young animators absorb. And now lately it's probably more Studio Ghibli and Japanese anime than the early days of Disney. But like if you think of like, what if this is another what if that I love to think about. What if Arthur Rackham had said yes when Disney reached out to him? Because I think Disney did want him to work on Fantasia and some of the other early features.
Snow White, he would have been perfect on Snow White.
He would have been perfect for that. And but he had such a great sense of silhouette and those kind of gnarly roots and everything.
Yeah, he would have been perfect.
And who's the guy that Andreas was really
Heinrich Clay.
T.S. Sullivan.
Thomas Sullivan.
Yes.
Yeah,
he was a big guy. All the animators loved his stuff, but
Heinrich Clay was the other one
course,
too.
Yeah.
Both of those, I mean, they were already influenced by them, but if those people had gone into actually trying to animate too, I mean, while we're dreaming, I've always said if Michelangelo, but especially Da Vinci, they were living today, or especially in the 80s, they would have been animators. There's no doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
They would have seen what was happening and then pushed it so much.
I don't know, Tom. I think they might have gotten into AI.
I was saying that's why I threw it into the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to talk about it now.
I don't want to say what
we're talking all about this cool history stuff, but we're not talking about you, James. I want to go back to Dinotopia because that was such a groundbreaking book when that came out. Nobody has seen anything. Talk about revolutionary. And how did Dinotopia happen? I know you've told this story a million times, and I apologize for bringing
No,
up
it's okay.
probably a story
I don't
you've
think
had
I've
to
heard this
answer.
story, so I would love to hear it, Tony.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dinotopia grew out of the work I did for National Geographic, because remember, I was an archaeology major, and I got a job in 1983, excuse me, doing a job for them reconstructing the world of Alexander Humboldt, and then later on the Moche of Peru and the Etruscans, and I did about 12 assignments for National Geographic. But on some of them, I went on location to some archaeological sites, which was really exciting for me to work with archaeologists and art directors to
you must
imagine
know
what this would have looked like.
Yeah, you must know Aaron Blaze, right? Because we
Yes.
just went to a lecture by him this weekend at Animation Y'all, and he tells, I've heard it many times, but he tells the story of how he wanted to be a National Geographic artist. You were probably the artist, one of them that he was inspired by. Has he told you that?
Yeah, no, we haven't talked about that specifically, but yeah, it was exciting. It was back in the days when Geographic would send people on location.
Amazing.
And anyway, I would sit there around the campfire with an archaeologist and say, "What's your dream? What would you really like to do in your career?" They'd always say something like, "I want to find the next Machu Picchu or Troy or some lost city."
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, I could always just dream that up and paint it. So I painted a picture called Waterfall City, which was the first one in 1988. And that one kind of gave me some ideas for where I could go with this idea. It was a big panoramic scene. I still have it. And it led to this idea, well, how about if I do a parade scene of another lost city? So I was reading about Atlantis and about all these lost worlds.
Yeah.
So I did one called Dinosaur Parade, just a standalone painting of people and friendly dinosaurs walking through the streets of a Roman-style city.
Well, and that's what I want to jump onto really quickly is you immediately did two things right off the bat, which was one, you did people and dinosaurs together, that you were kind of creating this world that had this friendship that now we've seen in How to Train Your Dragon and things like that, sort of similarly. But you were one of the very first to do that, to kind of show dinosaurs in a new way. Then on top of that, you also said you made it very colorful, very
the people riding dinosaurs was very intentional because I wanted to do all the motifs that were hard to do in live action during the Star Wars early era of special effects, so visual effects. So you couldn't really do people riding giant creatures or the water effects don't scale well if you miniaturize them in for something like Waterfall City. So I thought, here's something that could never be made into live action. Later on, of course, when digital effects started to become developed in the 90s and Jurassic Park came out, there was a lot of interest in that. But also my interest in designing layouts and scenes came from working in animation for Ralph Bakshi. So this is jumping back 10 years earlier.
Oh, wait a second. So you did get into animation. I didn't.
Yeah, well, but as a background painter.
Yeah.
So the basic story in a nutshell is when I got out of art school, and I'll tell you the story of riding across America on the freight trains later, but I got back and I was looking for a job because I was out of work. I couldn't find anything. So I went to Don Bluth and they weren't hiring. And I went to Disney and I had my portfolio. And I even got a call from Eric Larson, who looked at my portfolio and said, kind of with a sorrowful tone, "I'm sorry, this isn't really right for us because I can see you've copied Muybridge." And sometimes we look at photo reference, but we don't look at it too closely. We invent it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh shoot, I had the wrong thing in my portfolio. So he turned me down. But I went over to Bakshi's and Tom Kincaid and I wandered into Bakshi Studios, and there was no one there at first. We just wandered down a hallway. There was no secretary or anything. And this guy looked to me like an electrician. Said, "What are you guys doing? Why are you wearing suits?" Because we were carrying our portfolio. "We want a job doing background paintings," Tom said. So he said, I need a couple of background painters. I need actually a whole team of 6. We don't only have 6 or 8 guys. And we said to him, of course, we had never done background painting before. We said, "Oh, we can paint the whole movie for you." He said, "What do you mean the whole movie? That's 1,200 paintings." I said, "No problem. We can do it." And so he took it, said, we'll give you a try. So he gave us a try. And then the first thing he gave me was a thing painting these like battlefields with dead bodies on it. And I was just bombing out on it. I was having a real rough time. So he told Tom to tell me that not to come back on Monday. So I went home on Friday, bummed out that I lost this job because of incompetence. So I learned to paint on Friday, and I painted an establishing shot of like this Andes scene, Andes Mountains in South America.
Yeah.
With like late afternoon light. It really came out.
Yeah.
And I said, Tom, bring this in under another name. So he made up some other name. He brought it in. He said, I got another friend who could do the paintings for me, work with me. In fact, he's on, hire him. So I came in with this like a different hat and these glasses. And he said, aren't you just the guy I just fired? I said, yeah, but I learned to paint over the weekend. I'll give you another try. So I got the chance to do that. And then, of course, that was the learning curve, was learning to paint. And you had to paint a lot of paintings. We did like 11 a week.
Yeah. And
11 a week.
You and Thomas Kincaid, for those that don't know, you might have heard the name Thomas Kincaid before too. Later on in his career, he became very famous as the painter of light. That was kind of his mantra, or how he billed himself. Yeah. And they had galleries. There was galleries all over that were Thomas Kincaid galleries. They were like Christmas scenes or beautiful scenes of cottages and cozy environments and things like that. That's kind of
what he became his thing.
Your parents may have a Thomas Kincaid, and up in there.
But that was all after. I mean, when I knew him, he was doing like gritty urban scenes, totally different stuff than he was doing as a painter of light. So I think when people find out about the movie Fire and Ice or this book Artist Guide to Sketching, they go, "Is that the same guy?" But we had to match styles exactly. So we like, I don't know if you guys ever would work on each other's pictures, but Tom and I were like, we would try working on the same picture. I was a little better at drawing and he was a little better at painting. So I do the drawing, he'd do the painting. Yeah. And but eventually we would just try to match styles and do separate work. Now, did you guys do the same?
We used to do comic strips. Before animation, we loved comic strips, and we were going to do a comic strip together. And so, because I was better at penciling, I would do the pencils, and then Tom would do the inks over my pencils. And we'd try and
the lettering. I'd have to do the lettering.
And Tom would do the lettering, really. He had a good hand for the lettering. Yeah. So no, we would play back and forth on that kind of stuff all the time. But in animation, we didn't really. Not until recently, I guess you could say, for Light of the World, this film that we worked on this last couple of years, we had to do a lot of kind of almost simultaneous and drawovers, and so we've shared the same electronic palette, if you might say, canvas.
But back to your story, James, I want to throw this in there, that the irony is I feel like there's a lot, we share a lot of love, James. Tony and I grew up loving illustration and comic books and comic strips and animation, and it sounds like you have loves in all those areas. Like, we were big, and that's why we know who Rackham is, and of course, I'm sure you were influenced by Rockwell, Norman Rockwell.
For sure.
And you could see that in your work too, with your posing and your love of expression.
Rockwell was a huge, huge hero of mine when I was about 12. Because my dad took me to an exhibit of his work in San Francisco. So I got to see the originals. Also, MC Escher. But I loved the way Rockwell would lay out his whole process of getting models and posing them out, doing thumbnail sketches, and doing a full-on charcoal. I've done that a few times, where I do a full charcoal preliminary, and it really helps work out the storytelling of a picture before you get to the paint.
Yeah, I love it.
I want to circle back to Dinotopia just for one moment too, because
I didn't land that plane real quick.
Oh, you did.
The last thing I was going to say was, the other thing we share in common is Bakshi. We are both of our first jobs, ours and yours, were for Ralph Bakshi.
What were you doing for him?
Well, we were PAs.
Unfortunately, it was not creative.
It was before we really started doing any artwork for him. And it's funny because we worked a whole summer on The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse when that first came out. And we were PAs for him over a summer.
This was probably
in between Cal Arts
after you, I'm guessing.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Because Iron Knights came out in '83.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was summer of probably 89, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Something like that, or 88. I'm probably 88 maybe, but
Yeah, he had his
Yeah.
studio in Sunland when we were there, and it was funny
Yeah.
because animators in general have a very intense sort of work ethic, and they're leaning
Mhm.
over their light tables, and working it's a
Yeah.
very focused kind of concentration. But painting was a wilder thing for me and Tom. So we would
Mm.
want to loosen everyone up. Come on, you guys are too tight. So we would do gags, like we would pretend to cut off our finger. We'd have like a rubber finger with blood inside it, fake blood.
With red,
Or
red
we-
paint. Yeah.
Yeah, red paint. We were using cartoon color for our paint. We
Oh,
also
yeah.
had these
Awesome.
long pieces of brown paper, like 30 feet long, that we'd use for layouts. And one of us would walk through the hallways with the front end of this long piece of paper. And the other guy would be carrying the back of it. But the guy would look up from his table. He'd see this paper wandering by his office door. And then the guy at the end goes, "Hey, how you doing?" And stuff like that. And we always
Very
brought art
vaudevillian.
books. We brought in art books from the Brand Library in Glendale, and
Wow.
we had all these, like an ashtray, like a weighted ashtray that would tip up, and then we could spin it. It would shoot out cigarette butts. We'd kind of dance over the top of it. But the background room was a place where they would always bring the money guys, the investors. But Tom and I were working so hard on this book on sketching at the same time that we were so tired that we would just fall asleep at our work. So we would
Oh.
crawl underneath the tables and just sleep there. Sometimes you'd wake up from a nap and you'd see these polished leather shoes in front of your face. And some guy talking about how much this movie's going to cost. And we'd crawl out. The guy looked really doubtful about the whole thing.
Yeah. Probably killed some deals.
And Ralph
Oh,
would yell at
definitely.
you, I'm sure.
Say,
Okay, so I guess
slaves! He'd say, "Slaves, get to work."
slaves, get up. Yeah. So
One
going
time
back
I
to,
was.
oh, sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
I'll just say one more little story here. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
sitting next to Tom there, painting away on the backgrounds, and I said, "Hey, Tom," or Jackson, I would call him Jackson. I said, "If you tap your head while you're painting, it shifts your entire visual field from one side to the other, and you can't accommodate that. So just try tapping." So we were both sitting there tapping our head, and then we sort of sensed that someone was behind us looking at us as we were working. It was
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver and Bakshi and Frazetta. We're all standing there behind us thinking,
Nice.
You
they were
guys are
just talking
tapping
up
your head.
we're just tapping our heads like this.
Wait, I think
they
it's
said-
working. You're like,
They had
"It's
just said,
working.
like,
Look, it's-"
what a good team of background painters they had, and then they looked at us and thought, these two are completely out of their minds.
Sounds like you had a good time, though. It sounds like
Yeah.
those are some of your best times because your relationship with Tom and other people that you worked with, it was sounds like it was a fun time to be there.
It was. I miss that collaborative studio environment, and I'm sure you guys love that
Yeah.
too. Just working with the whole team and having the
Yes.
talents of
miss
everybody
that.
pulling in the
Yeah.
same direction, and then going
It's
to
not the same.
dailies.
Yeah.
Going to
Dailies
dailies
are
was
always
great.
fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
because for me as a background painter, it was like entering my paintings because you look at the scene from different angles and
Yeah.
you swing off, someone's swinging off the vine. Of course, you want to get that character out of the way. I want to see that nice rendering I did in the background.
I remember going to dailies. Now that you got me thinking about it, but at the Burbank lot when we were in Burbank on Little Mermaid, Tom and I were just like interns at the time, but we were invited to sit in on dailies, and there was one animator named Sean Keller who was just big comedy hijinks guy. I don't know where he found the time, but he would not only do his work, he was pretty fast, so he'd not only do his work, but then he'd always put in a joke scene into dailies.
Great. Oh,
Somehow
nice.
there was always some little. And I, what was the one?
Wasn't it that where it's the intro of Ariel and
Yeah.
they're kind of panning past all these girls, the sisters and stuff, and then I think she turns or something, and it's Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's what I remember that he did.
I do remember that one too. Yeah, one of his sisters in the oyster or something that opens up was Bugs Bunny. Yeah,
kind of a reveal. Yeah,
that got
Nice.
a huge laugh. But he would do stuff like that all the time, just to make us laugh. And I think he got his hand slapped so many times for doing that. He stopped doing it. After
yeah, because they were like, "Well, if you're that fast, then just do more work.
You should be doing more.
Yeah, come on, get to work
for the movie."
Yeah. All right, guys. I'm gonna pull us back to Dinotopia for this one question. So, not only did you do Dinotopia, what year did that come out? Dinotopia
92.
92. Okay, so not only was that a real groundbreaker for you, but also for the world, I think, because it portrayed like a really fantastic new world, as you said, that you invented. But then there was sequels too, or spin-offs. It sounds like Dentopia, Journey to Chandara, and there's a First Flight, Dinotopia First Flight. I see these as being, they must have been influences for Jurassic Park and for James Cameron's oh gosh, now
Avatar.
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 Have you ever heard that they were influenced by your work, Spielberg?
Well,
or
I
Cameron?
mean, I made friends with remotely with some of the guys like Crash McCreary who worked on Jurassic Park, and I wouldn't say Dinotopia influenced it because Jurassic Park was already in existence about the same time as a book.
Oh,
The
okay.
And
book,
but you
Michael
know
Crichton. Yeah.
there are probably certain scenes they didn't do because of Dinotopia. Who knows? But
Yeah.
but they were friends of me, mine anyway, when they worked on that project. And you know, I think people think along similar lines a lot.
Yeah.
And
But I'm
Yeah.
surprised they didn't tap you though. That must have happened, right? Because you were the dinosaur guy. Like everybody thought of you first for quite a while there.
and dinosaurs weren't popular when I started off on Dinotopia. People thought I was crazy because I had a great publishing mentor, Ian Ballantyne and Betty Ballantyne. He's the one that founded Ballantyne Books and Bantam Books
wow.
and popularized paperbacks for adult readers and things like that. And he saw at a science fiction convention where I had also a lot of paperback covers I'd been doing. He saw these Waterfall City, Dinosaur Parade. He said, "There's a book here, but it's got to be 160 pages." I said, 160. I said, "Ian, that's 5 picture book length. That's really a lot of pictures. I'm gonna have to tell my clients that I can't do anything for them for 3 years because that's how long it'll take me." But he said it's got to have scope. He said it's got to have scope. So he was right. And he saw it as a book. Don't do this as a book for children. Do it as a picture book for older readers. So that was the goal.
That
was revolutionary.
That is revolutionary.
It's risky too because a book like that can fall through the cracks. And no one knows where to put it in the bookstore. Should it be in the kids section, the adult section, the gift book section? Ian said, just put it in the front of the store.
I think they put it in all those sections now that I think about it, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, how big of a success was that?
It was everywhere.
I remember it being just huge. How big was that for you and how life-changing was that moment?
Oh, it was totally life-changing because I got the full backing of Turner Publishing, which was the publisher of the original book. And that meant they were running ads internationally. We had 18 different countries that published the book at the same time. Wow. They released 50,000 copies at the original Book Expo just to give away to potential bookstore clients.
Oh, you're kidding me.
And so they printed like a couple million copies eventually. It was really big, and it changed my life. And so I worked directly on the next one. But Turner Publishing didn't last that long because it got bought up by Time Warner. So we had to find a new home. And eventually we found our way to Andrews McMeel and to Dover. Dover publishes it now. And they're a great publisher because they keep a book in print. So we're very lucky to have all those books still in print now. It's unusual for a book to stay in print that long.
Well, and so as Tony was saying, like there were spin-offs from Dinotopia. How many were there? How many did you end up doing that were Dinotopia related?
Well, there were 4 books that I did, 4 fully illustrated books that I wrote and illustrated. Then we had a digest novel series for young readers, like a chapter book series, written by other authors that I collaborated with. But there were a lot of licensing things that came along that we didn't really want to do. And the thing was, I think most of the toy companies wanted to see a live action feature before they would really commit to doing a toy line. So we didn't do a whole lot of licensing, and I prefer to put focus on things I can actually control. And create rather than being just a licensing supervisor or something.
Well, speaking of which, you just got me thinking, when are we going to do the animated Dinotopia? There was an animated, wasn't there? Wasn't there an animated thing?
I think there was. Yeah, I think Hallmark did over my objection because I think Dinotopia works best in a realistic mode. Yeah, I love animation, but animation has to be stylized. I mean, it's stylized movement, really.
And no studio approached you about doing a live action then with visual
Oh yeah,
effects?
we had a license with Columbia Pictures, Sony, starting in
Okay.
'93,
Okay.
but they had to change over in leadership, and it eventually, even though they
Yeah.
brought in Ralston and did a lot of development, they eventually kicked it back out again into Turnaround, and it got
And
made by Hallmark Entertainment in 2002.
Oh,
oh,
okay.
and
Yeah, it
that
was
was
a
animated,
series.
or
It
It
was
was
live
live
action.
action
that's right. Okay.
with digital, digital
Yeah.
sets, some real sets that they built in Pinewood Studios. We went and saw where they were filming. It was kinda cool.
Oh, neat.
And
Where they
and
made
some
Star
digital
Wars.
dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And did that was I want to say that was a series, wasn't it? I think I remember that.
It was, but it was up against, like,
Okay.
Survivor and I don't know what else on TV. We didn't have a TV at the time, so it was tough for us to watch the videotapes they were sending us. So we would go to the post office had these promotional video cassette players in the post office. So
Yeah.
we'd ask, "Is it okay if we look at this screen, this sample of this guy that does CGI?" Okay, so fine. So then I remember putting one into the player, and there was this long line in the post office of people just bored waiting for their turn. And they're
Yeah.
all looking over at the screen, and it was some guy doing medical illustration with all these nude figures. And I thought, "Oh my god, this is really embarrassing to be looking at this." So we had to rent a TV to watch it when it finally came
Yeah.
out.
Hey,
Oh
yeah,
my
they weren't
gosh.
that expensive even back then, so feels like you could have bought one and a
Yeah.
VCR.
I guess I could have. Well, what
Yeah,
we
you
did
could've.
was we raised 2 sons without a TV, without computers, without cell phones.
Oh my
Oh
All through
gosh.
the
That's
through the
great.
'90s. We just wanted to have, like, read aloud story time, puppet theaters, and stuff.
Mhm.
I was just thinking this is another interesting thought. You know how we've seen Hollywood going from the big studios, the trend seems to be toward smaller independent productions from smaller studios because people
Yeah.
could do more with a smaller team and less budget. But what if the endpoint of that trend is not just a bunch of niche productions, but people actually telling stories in their own house? Isn't
Yeah.
that the logical endpoint of that trend? People
It
making
should
puppet
be.
theater out of cardboard boxes?
I feel like we're
Well,
going back to that. I think
yeah.
AI is going to drive everybody. There's going to be a surge of handcrafted, of
Yes.
traditional that's gonna become popular again like never
Wait, you're
before.
saying no, wait, you just said it made it sound like AI is we're gonna use AI to do those things.
No,
You're
no, I
saying the
think
opposite,
I'm saying that
a
because of
revolt.
AI, there's going to be a whole sect, a niche element that rises up that just craves handcrafted art,
Handcrafted.
Yeah, I agree.
traditionally.
Let's all pray
And
for that. Yes.
yeah, but
Definitely.
I think it'll be a niche. Unfortunately, it won't be probably mainstream,
I
but
think
who
it's just
knows?
James
Well,
Gurney that's gonna survive that. Like
no,
we'll
I
just buy
think
his stuff.
AI is only threatening if you're a digital artist, really, because if you work it by hand, doing
Mm,
drawing and painting with physical materials,
true.
it does. What can AI do to threaten you? Nothing, especially if you document it with a video.
Yeah.
But I
Just
think
do
what
it
real
faster.
opportunity with AI is to combine it with truly handmade puppet making or stop motion, things like that, to enhance those sorts of things. Just
Well,
like with Leica, the breakthrough was combining 3D printing with computer modeling and
Yeah.
stop motion animation.
well, and speaking of
Yeah.
which, I think it's interesting that James Gurney, the guy that you're describing to us right now, seems like he was very anti digital and computers and stuff like that. Not only from a parent standpoint for the next generation, your kids, but you've always been very traditional, very traditional artist in that
Mhm.
respect, and kind of known for that. And yet I feel like James Gurney today, I've been seeing a lot on social media. So have you been starting to up your game when it comes to marketing yourself,
Yeah,
getting out in the
YouTube.
world,
Yeah.
Well,
that kind of stuff?
I'm not anti-digital at all. In fact, I love nonlinear editing on a for making videos for YouTube and
Yeah.
Mm,
animation and stuff like that. So digital cameras have really changed my whole process. But
mm.
as far as I'm just too clueless to really learn how to use a Cintiq or anything, so I just do everything by
Well,
hand.
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. You still haven't gone,
No, not
digital as
really.
far as illustration goes, right? Painting.
No, I'm interested in if it's animation I'm playing with on the side, it would be trying to figure out how to do puppet animation or stop motion animation that has motion blur, because that's the
Yeah.
one thing that's hard to get with stop motion, even with the Leica level of animation. Is
Yeah.
how do you get motion blur? Because that's what really gives a feeling of something's truly alive and in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And in 2D, I teach my students all the time about, and in 2D character animation 1, we talk about motion blur, and we talk about, smears and wipes and
Oh yeah.
multiples and all the different things you do in 2D animation that are old school that help to simulate the idea of motion blur.
Oh, I
and
love
it-
like the Warner Brothers smears.
yes,
They're
yes,
just
I know.
so fantastic.
We did so, and I tell my students this all the time. And you don't see it as much anymore, except for maybe in the wilder, more caricatured animation of like Looney Tunes. They'll still do that sort of thing. But for a couple shots, Mike Surrey, who did Timon in The Lion King, and me that did Pumbaa in The Lion King, we were allowed to do some of that kind of stuff because they were the more cartoony characters. And, I love sneaking in stuff like that just for effect. It's pretty cool.
Well, and I've done a few Roger Rabbit's cartoons.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Those are a blast to do that kind of stuff in.
Did you work on the short cartoons that went with the Roger Rabbit movie?
Yeah, well, not that one, but the ones that came after that, the one that came out with Dick Tracy, believe it or not, Roller Coaster Rabbit, and then later on Trail Mix Up, that came out with a movie that nobody remembers. I don't even remember. But
yeah, those weren't as popular, but there was like 4 or 5 Roger Rabbit shorts that came out after the movie.
Well, there's Tummy Trouble. There was only 3 actually, but yeah,
there was 3. Just
Tummy
Trouble, Roller Coaster,
Trouble,
Trail Mix Up.
Yep, that's it.
But going back to what you were saying a minute ago, I think it'll be interesting to see how AI does get digested by the field of animation. I know Katzenberg made that prediction that it'll be 10 times more efficient. And I thought to myself, no, because it's not going to get innovated by the big studios because there's too much, the workflows and the pipelines are too well established. And this will utterly revolutionize the workflows completely.
Well,
so it'll be little it's like when the dinosaurs when the meteor hit, it's the little little turtles and frogs that survived.
but we've been through it once. I mean, honestly, when you say like, "Oh, I don't think they'll do it," they have to redo the pipeline. We did that once with 2D going into CG animation pipelines, and they literally shut down everything 2D, sold the desks, the equipment, laid off those people, and said, "Now we're doing digital and CG animation and new people, new training." And it took a couple years, but not that long, honestly. It was only.
And I wouldn't want to be a CEO trying to run one of these companies because it's just tough to make these decisions and know. Do you lay off your whole team and then hire in new people that don't know how to draw?
I mean, my feeling is, and this is based on us interviewing people that are in the AI world and things like that, is that we're not quite as far into it as everybody kind of makes it sound, especially like Jeffrey Katzenberg. He was like in 3 years. Like I heard his talk. He said within 10 years, and then he said 7 years, then he said 5, and then he said 3. You know what I mean? Like he kept bringing it down. I think it was just to make it more of a news story, honestly.
Yeah.
Right around the corner. It was like 90% of the people will get let go because we won't need them anymore.
Yeah.
It was a lot of really grand numbers and stuff. And I don't think we're that far. We're not that close to it.
No, the economic model for AI image generation, especially Gen AI, is questionable. Like whether video generation is going to be profitable for these companies because it eats so many computer resources, and people don't want to pay that much. Right now, they're using it for making cute little koala bears and stuff. But will it really get widely adopted by people? Who knows? It's hard to say.
It is because it is evolving fast. So that's the hard part. You can't really guess, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. And yet people do all the time.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, Tony, when you were saying you think there's going to be a reaction. I think if you look at the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, there was you had the William Morris and the whole craftsman movement, and you got Art Nouveau kind of coming out of as a reaction to mechanization. So I think that's going to be happening.
What's interesting, and this is kind of equitable, is that I don't know if you've heard these reports that they had been saying for years that publishing was going to die out completely.
Yeah.
Everything would be Kindle,
Right.
digital books and stuff. And they say that TikTok has reignited books
Definitely.
almost more than any other platform or
Yep.
kind of newer invention, because they have like, what is it called? Book Talk or something like that.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and where people are sharing about books, and and we could say Oprah Winfrey has done that too, and Reese Witherspoon with their platforms. They talk about books, and it's always hardcover books in general. But
Yeah.
that the new generation, that's what they want. And so now Barnes and Nobles are
Yeah,
starting
I
to
was
come
gonna say.
back. They're actually
Yeah.
creating more
I'm
and more
glad
of
to
those
see
brick
that.
and mortars. Yeah,
I'm glad to see books so central to our culture. It's good to see,
me
because you're
too.
right. In the 90s, no, I don't want to say 90s, 2010s, 2010 to 2015, let's say, every publisher figured that they would have to be, it was all going digital, and it was all going to Kindle and all that. But it
Yeah.
didn't really happen that way, especially not for art books. Art books need to be on paper, and it's a very vibrant world now. So I'm putting
Mhm.
my focus right now on books, on Substack, Substack is kind of like where blogging was in 2010 or so,
Yeah.
and doing YouTube videos, YouTube tutorials. Those
I
seem
think
to be the
that's
most
awesome.
vibrant. And the message I would give to young people who are saying, I'm just leaving art school, I'm terrified by AI, what do I do? How do I make a living at this? I would say people my age have had to reinvent their careers like three or four times. I mean, completely
Yeah.
reinvent. I've had, art
Yeah.
directors leave, publishers fold down, that
Yeah.
have pounded the pavement. It's something that if you're my age, you have to really stop and think, how can I do everything differently to stay afloat?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
You know
think
what, Jay?
I think art stores are next, guys. I'm gonna just make a prediction here. I think we should all invest in art stores. And I think James Gurney, you need to have a series of brushes that have your name on it so that people can go out and you'll make a
some
fortune.
branding of paints or
Yes.
something.
There you go.
and
I'll
sketchbooks.
hire you as my merch coordinator.
I think that's a really good point, though. And I just want to jump on that real quick, which is we have seen that too. Like we're a little bit younger than you, but not that much, maybe within 10 years. And within our lifetime on the animation side, obviously, we've had to reinvent ourselves. And you're right. I think that's the message we need to get out to this younger generation, is that artists have always had to or desired to, one or the other, evolve. And that's kind of part of being a creative is evolving and finding your new niche, you could call it.
And I think it's important for young artists to look at, for inspiration, to artists that are different from what everyone else is looking at. There's a tendency, I think, and you probably saw this at animation expos that you've been to or that you've even put on, that there's a tendency for a lot of young artists to do the same stuff that looks like character models are all the same.
Right.
They're all looking at Studio Ghibli or whatever.
Or
But
Disney
look
or
at
whatever it
Sullivan,
is.
look at Heinrich Klei,
Yeah.
or look at artists of the past that,
Yeah.
because that's where you're going to develop your style that's going to really look original.
The younger generation, having just been through Animation Y'all this weekend, and it was a big success. We had a lot of young animators there, a lot of kids that are in school right now and colleges and stuff. And I think they went into the weekend pretty hopeless. There's a lot of hopelessness. There's a lot of depression about what is the future of animation. But I think you hit it on the head, James. I think, and that was the real takeaway, I think, from the weekend for me and for hopefully for a lot of our attendees, was that reinvent yourself. Aaron Blaze presented a short that he made all by himself because he had the software.
4 years, I think it was, something like that.
Software is available. You can do anything you want. Create your stuff. Create your own stuff. Don't let corporate things and structures. Now, we all need jobs. We need to pay the bills. But there's, be a barista, and then on the side, work hard at developing your own stuff, your own Dinotopia.
Well, I mean, honestly, I
I'm a
think
big
all
admirer.
three of us, we've all done that, right? I'm sure you had the same thing. You didn't just come out of art school, and you know what I mean? Like there was a little struggle years, and
Sure.
right?
Sure. And I admire what Aaron has done with Snow Bear.
Yeah.
Doing a short like that, and then bringing people along on the whole development process from start to finish.
Yeah, online. He's had people watching him for years now, animate it live, on Facebook or whatever through his YouTube channels. Really
Well,
smart stuff.
and James, you kind of started to, we got to wrap up, so I'm getting there. But you started to kind of go there, which is like, what is James Gurney doing now? What do you want to be doing in the future? Do you still have bucket lists? And we do also want to talk about your newest book. Well, relaunch of this first book, actually, probably, right?
Yeah, well,
But
to answer your question in one word, it's books. I'm really focused on books right now, and this one is the one that's released today. It's a reissue of one that came out in 1982. So before we got the backseat job, Tom and I dropped out of art school, rode the freight trains across America with this crazy idea to write a book about our adventures. So we slept on rooftops and graveyards, and we had met all these lumberjacks and loggers, and did portraits of them, and just had these wild adventures, and ended up sleeping on a pier in New York City, and then knocking on the door of a publisher in New York City with this crazy idea of a book we wanted to write called we didn't know what to call. We called Artists on the Road at the beginning. And they eventually published it. It was very popular, but it went out of print. Tom's then went off to do his Lightbox, what was it called? Lightpost Publishing. And that grew in the 90s, but kind of went downhill afterwards. He ended up dying in 2012, which is sad to see him pass.
yes.
But what he did then was much different from what he did during this project. And he was a great collaborator on this one. And so
it looks like from the title that it's a how-to book, but it doesn't sound like it started out that way, because it was literally sketches you guys were doing as you were traveling.
Yeah.
Right. And
we have a whole
then
chapter
was it
on
the publisher that kind of had said, "Oh, we need to make it more of a how-to. Let's call it the Artist's Guide to Sketching," or did that come from you guys?
Well, we love the Loomis books, Andrew Loomis's books, and those were a big inspiration. So we wanted to do it as kind of a how-to book, but with a lot of stories woven through it. And the book eventually went out of print because Watson Gubble didn't really support it, and it got really expensive on the secondary market. So I talked to Tom before he passed about, should we bring this book out again? And he said, "Oh yeah, but let's do a whole chapter at the end about bringing it up to date with our new work we've done since then, bringing in Dinotopia and bringing in my painting of light stuff." I said, "Tom, if you get a copy of Rubber Soul, you don't want to hear about what the Beatles did after Rubber Soul. You want to hear just stuff up to that date, right?"
Good point.
Yeah.
So we never agreed on how to re-release it. We were busy and whatever. So after he passed, I contacted his widow and his daughters, said, "What about bringing this book out?" And we found the right publisher, Andrews McMeel. They published a lot of Tom's calendars anyway. So they said, yeah. So they did a great job. We brought all the originals back, re-scanned them. Some of them were in color. Some were on brown paper. Some of them were full color. And they did a beautiful job of republishing it. And I wrote a new introduction to it. And we have a new section of art that was done at the same time, but never got into the book.
Oh, that's cool. So the expanded and remastered edition, the remastered is probably referring to better pictures of the art and things like
better
that.
reproductions. Yeah.
But the expanded part is that newer
new material.
Art from that period. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really neat.
Like the unreleased songs that the Beatles wrote for Rubber Soul, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
So
I love that.
The book's been taken off. I know some people maybe have ordered the book that from our website, jamesgurney.com. Yeah. And I've shipped out like about 800 copies already for our little store. That's way more than we normally would do.
Wow.
And we still have about 300 or 400 to go. Well, I've got some people helping me, but this is a big job to ship out all these, sign the books and customize them and everything. So anyway, please be patient. If you ordered one and you're saying, "Where's my book?" That it's coming, but it's just delayed by the fact that we're just human.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're not a corporation.
Is one man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also Stuart NG Books, our sponsor. I bet he'd love to have some. Have you contacted him about your book? That it's
we'll probably be going out to the Lightbox Expo in the fall.
Good.
And so I'll sign at his booth again.
Well, I
Mhm.
got one, like you said, you sent one to
Yeah,
one
you
to
were nice
Tom and I.
enough to send us each a book.
I can't
So
wait
that
to
we could
get
talk
into
about
it, but I'm a geek, so I'm going to get you to sign it. I'll probably have to meet up with you at
Yep.
Lightbox this coming year, and so you could sign my book.
I'm gonna
Sure,
get
I'd
a
love to.
little plein air painting in the front of
Oh,
it.
Tom
I might
always wants
do
freebies.
I might do a portrait of you guys.
Oh,
Oh,
that would be fun.
yeah, I was
Wow.
going to ask you. I have some very harsh lighting on me through this podcast for those that are watching online. Um,
Yeah.
were you
Yeah.
thinking about my light structures at all during this interview? Oh, you've been
Oh,
drawing. You've been drawing.
wait,
Just
you
do
mean
a little-
we're
He's showing
talking?
us.
no,
He's showing us a sketchbook that he's been drawing in, and it looked
I
like.
had I got the time wrong. I thought it was 4:00 Eastern time, but it,
Yeah.
so I was sitting there and I thought, oh, so I watched some of your other videos.
Oh, okay.
And it was
Okay.
Basically, you
sketching
just
some-
drew an egg and then
Uh,
you started adding details.
I think you're drawing me because he's beardless. It must be Tony, not
Maybe
Tom, right?
so. Or it was an old video, Tony. You never
could
know.
be.
Well, we got some nice light and shadow going here, and I
Yeah,
thought
the
that
light
would-
is amazing.
it's-
The light's been moving as
Yeah.
you've been sitting there. It's amazing. to
Yeah.
see.
It has. Yeah,
How
we're
many
getting
people
into
listen on pure audio to your podcast?
Mostly it's audio, and yeah, I mean it's probably 10,000 or so after it goes out for over a month or so.
Nice.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but
I
we
mean,
like to refer them as our family, so there are 7 listeners. We figure we have at least
It's
7.
it's 7 listeners who listen over and over again.
Yeah.
Oh, they're the loyalists for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It might go up to 10 that just kind of come and go. But
It's
yeah.
funny, nowadays anyone who produces content for YouTube or Instagram is
Mhm.
very aware of their audience and who follows and who doesn't and who
Yeah.
quit following or whatever. But when Tom and I wrote the book Artist Guide to Sketching, we had no idea of followers or fans or students. We had nothing like that. We only
Right.
got when the book came out, we got like 3 fan letters, and that's all. Period. And that's it. No, we got no feedback other than that.
Yeah.
So we were sending it out into a void.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was those are hard days. And those 3 people, they had to put extra effort into it, right?
Oh,
They had to
yeah.
track down and send it
Yeah.
to the publisher.
Find your address.
probably, and-
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
I mean, they spoke for probably 100 people at least, I would guess.
Well, I
but,
sent a copy to a hero of mine named, probably a guy you've never heard of, named Howard Brody. But if you ever saw the CBS News in the 70s, I think it was, he was doing the courtroom art for CBS, and like the Howard, like the
Oh, really?
Charles
okay.
Manson trial and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he said to me, he was drawing Charles Manson, and he looked over at him like a tiger would, and just locked him in his gaze as he was
Yeah.
sketching his portrait from life,
Oh my God.
And he said it's terrifying. But he did these really loose, scribbly things, and he liked the motion chapter in the Artist Guide to Sketching because I was trying to figure out different ways of sketching things that are in motion around us. You can draw a walk cycle, or what I developed, I went to a boxing match and I wanted to show, the guys in the ring as they're moving
Yeah.
around. So I dipped a rag on the tip of my finger into a bowl of kind of charcoal dust. Now this is within this sweaty thing in the Olympic Auditorium.
Mm.
People are moving around, shouting, cheering. And then I just rubbed the line of action and then built it with an eraser and a charcoal pencil from that.
Oh,
And
neat.
it was just a way of drawing. We tried all kinds of other methods for just capturing things that are moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
I
you
love
ever
Amazing.
sketch like when I went sketching
Well-
with the animators, they would do like that guy has a double bounce walk cycle. I said, what are you talking about? So here, let me show you what I mean. And then they draw a series of. I was so impressed by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for us, I mean, we were telling you about at Disney, we had Walt Stanfield teaching us a lot, and he would do like 10-second gestures or 30-second gesture kind of poses where you really had to concentrate on, and they could be more active, even though
Right.
usually it was the model. If it's a punch or something, the model would be frozen.
Well,
But
yeah.
you got to try and capture it really quickly because the model moves into the next pose, and that was always an adventure too. So
Well,
but
and that was an
even
eye
harder.
opener, coming from like say
Yeah.
traditional art schools. And we didn't do a lot of traditional art schools. We went to Cal Arts almost right out of high school, but still we had done some classes and stuff. But that was a real eye opener when Walt would go, no, push the poses. And we're so used to just drawing exactly what was in front of us. He was like, no. Yeah. And he would always like give more of a line of action. And he because sometimes the models weren't very, dynamic. So anyway, that kind of mentality. And then he's like, well, no, if they're kind of standing there and they're on a cane, like bend the cane a little bit to show the weight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We were like, but that's not in front of us. You kind of resist that.
It felt wrong.
Yeah. It's like, wait, but then I'm not drawing that, but what he was trying to have us see, like Tom's saying, is
push it.
Look past the pose into what the potential for the pose is.
Yeah, like he would always be like, throw that hip out further and things like that. Like he'd get mad if you did it accurately, honestly.
Right.
And
if it looked good because it was accurate,
eye-opener.
it was wrong.
Yeah.
If you guys could have Bill Teitla as a guest, what would you ask him?
Oh my gosh! I mean,
I
would want to know about he's always known for the emotional animation.
Fantasia,
the Chernobog,
but
also he did the delicate emotional scene. He did in Dumbo. He did the mom rocking the little baby Dumbo. I mean, he did everything, but I would say emotion is what he was able to get into. He must have been a big influence on Glenn Keane, because Glenn was more our generation of an emotional animator. And I think he learned a lot from studying Bill Teitla too. I haven't heard.
I think he did later on. He was he was trained by Ollie originally, as his assistant and stuff. But you could, and then Mark Henn is sort of like a Frank Thomas sort of influenced by Frank Thomas. Well, guys, we do have to wrap this up.
Okay.
I mean, James, I'd love you to interview us, and I think that's what you've been wanting to do. You've been like, I have questions for you guys too.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
We
could talk all night long. Yeah.
Well, Tom, as we always say, please, for our audience, go check out jamesgurney.com again. Check out his books. There's going to be more coming. Thank you for that, James. But the Artist Guide to
Sketching is dropping right now.
Yeah, there's one on gouache that I'm in the early stages on. It's going to be another kind of companion volume to Color and Light and Imaginative Realism. But it's just, I got to get this book out there, and that's got to be first. So I'll be doing a little tour out to California. I don't know when this podcast is dropping, but I'll be doing it in the middle of March. I'll be out there in California. If you go to my Instagram, you can kind of see what the schedule is going to be. And then I'll be doing a Northeast tour and swing down the Mid-Atlantic. I don't know if I'll get to Nashville, but I'd love to come see Animation Y'all sometime.
Oh, man.
We'd love to have you next year. Let's do it next year for sure.
Love to.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah. Well, this will be dropping very soon, so it will be in March. Check out those March dates at jamesgurney.com so you can get not only a copy of this book, but get it signed by the man himself. I know I'm going to get mine signed, Tom. At probably next time we'll see you, we'll be at probably Lightbox, because we're planning on going.
Good. Look forward to talking to you guys there. Thanks for doing this podcast. It's a real service to all of us who love animation.
Oh,
thank you.
I love that you're a guy that loves animation. That's really cool. We've learned a lot from you. All right, guys. Tom, as we always say,
animate from the heart, right?
James,
I said it for you. All right.
He said it so fast. Animate from the heart.
Be sure to subscribe to the Pencil-ish Studios YouTube channel.